The bell above Clara's diner jingled softly, a sound as familiar to her as the creak of her childhood home's porch swing. It was 5:30 a.m., and Willow Creek, a sleepy town cradled in the hills of Northern California, was still wrapped in the quiet of pre-dawn. The diner's chipped red and white sign glowed faintly, its neon letters flickering like a heartbeat. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of rising dough, brewing coffee, and the faint sweetness of cinnamon. Clara's diner wasn't much to look at. Worn linoleum floors, mismatched chairs, a jukebox silent for a decade. But to the people of Willow Creek, it was a sanctuary, a place where the world felt a little kinder. Clara Thompson, 52, with silver threads weaving through her chestnut hair, moved with the steady grace of someone who'd spent her life in motion. Her hands, dusted with flour, kneaded dough with a rhythm that was almost meditative. She wore a faded apron, its pockets stuffed with pens and a small notebook where she jotted down orders and, occasionally, her own quiet thoughts. The diner had been her mother's and her grandmother's before that, passed down like a cherished heirloom. It was a legacy of hard work and heart, one Clara carried with pride, even when the bills piled up and the roof leaked during spring rains. She glanced at the clock above the counter, its hands ticking toward 5:37. Her heart gave a small, familiar flutter. She reached beneath the counter and pulled out a paper bag, carefully packed with a warm cinnamon roll, a slice of ham, an apple, and a bottle of milk. She set it on the counter's edge, where the light from the diner's neon sign cast a soft, rosy glow. This was her ritual, her secret. For 6 months, she'd left food for a boy who came like a ghost in the early morning, and every day he took it without a word. Clara didn't know his name, not officially. Whispers in town painted a vague picture. A kid, maybe 12, living with an uncle in a rusted trailer on the outskirts of Willow Creek. The uncle was a shadow in the community, a man who haunted the local bar more than he held a job. Clara didn't need to know the details to recognize the boy's hunger. She'd seen it before, in her own reflection as a child, when her mother stretched every penny to keep the diner running and their stomachs full. Hunger had a look, hollow cheeks, wary eyes, a body curled in on itself like it was trying to disappear. Clara saw it in the boy, and it stirred something deep within her, a need to act, to give. At 5:37, a shadow appeared at the mouth of the alley across the street. The boy emerged, his hoodie pulled tight against the morning chill. His sneakers, frayed and too big, slapped softly against the pavement as he shuffled toward the diner. He kept his head down, his hands stuffed in his pockets, his eyes scanning the empty street. Clara turned away, wiping the counter with a rag, giving him the space to slip in unnoticed. The bell jingled, faint and quick, and she heard the rustle of the paper bag being lifted. By the time she looked up, he was gone, the bag with him. She smiled to herself, a quiet warmth spreading through her chest. It was enough. For now, it was enough. Clara hadn't always been so quiet about her kindness. As a young woman, she'd been bold, outspoken, dreaming of a life beyond Willow Creek. She'd wanted to be a chef in a big city, to create dishes that told stories. But when her mother fell ill, Clara returned to the diner, her dreams tucked away like old recipes in a drawer. Her mother's death left her with the diner and a lesson. Kindness doesn't need a spotlight. Clara took it to heart, slipping extra bread into the bags of struggling families, offering coffee to weary travelers, and now feeding a boy who didn't know her name. The morning unfolded in a familiar rhythm. Old Man Jenkins shuffled in at 6 o'clock, his crossword puzzle tucked under his arm, grumbling about the cold. Sarah, the school teacher, arrived at 6:30, her smile bright despite the early hour, ordering blueberry pancakes and asking after Clara's health. Truckers rolled through, their boots heavy on the floor, swapping stories of the road over plates of eggs and hash browns. Clara greeted them all with her easy smile, her hands never still, pouring coffee, flipping bacon, sliding plates across the counter. But her mind kept drifting to the boy. Where did he go after he took the bag? Did he have a warm place to sleep? Was he safe? She pushed the thoughts away, focusing on the sizzle of the griddle, but they lingered like a stubborn stain. Days turned into weeks, and the ritual continued. Clara began to notice small things about the boy, the way his shoulders hunched, as if carrying a weight too heavy for his thin frame, the way his eyes, a deep brown, flickered with something like gratitude when he thought she wasn't looking. She started adding extra items to the bag, a muffin one day, a chocolate chip cookie the next. Once, she slipped in a pair of wool socks, her heart pounding as she wondered if he'd take them. The next morning, the socks were gone, and Clara felt a quiet thrill, like she'd crossed an invisible line into his world. Winter tightened its grip on Willow Creek, frosting the diner's windows and making the old heater groan. Clara took to wearing an extra sweater under her apron, her breath visible in the chilly kitchen. The boy's visits never faltered, though his hoodie looked thinner, his cheeks more hollow. Clara's worry grew, a knot in her chest that tightened each time she saw him. She wanted to talk to him, to ask his name, to offer more than just food. But fear held her back, fear that she'd scare him off, that he'd stop coming. So she kept to their silent agreement, leaving the bag and turning away. One morning in late January, the boy didn't come. Clara waited, her eyes flicking to the clock. 5:37 came and went. Then 5:45. By 6 o'clock, her stomach was churning. She stepped outside, the cold biting at her face, and peered down the alley. Nothing. Just the wind stirring a pile of leaves. She went back inside, the bag untouched on the counter. All day she was distracted, her smile strained. Had something happened to him? Was he sick? Hurt? The questions gnawed at her, but she had no answers, no way to find him. She thought of her mother, who'd once said, "You can't save everyone, Clara, but you can give them a reason to keep going." Clara clung to those words, but they felt hollow without the boy's shadow at her door. The next morning, he was back. Clara's relief was so sharp it nearly brought tears to her eyes. He looked worse than before, his face pale, his eyes shadowed, his hands trembling as he reached for the bag. The previous day's bag was still there, and she saw him hesitate, his gaze lingering on it. Then he took both bags, the old and the new, and slipped out. Clara's heart twisted. He hadn't eaten yesterday. The thought was unbearable, a weight that settled in her bones. At night, she stayed late at the diner, baking. The kitchen was her refuge, a place where she could pour her worry into something tangible. She made a loaf of her mother's special honey bread, soft and sweet, its crust golden and fragrant. She packed it with a thermos of hot vegetable soup, a thick wool scarf, and a note, simple in her careful handwriting. "You're always welcome here. Stay warm. Clara." She tucked it into the bag, her hands trembling. It was a risk, breaking their silence, but she couldn't keep pretending she didn't see his need. She needed him to know he wasn't alone. The next morning, he took the bag without opening it. Clara watched from the corner of her eye, her heart pounding. Would he read the note? Would he come back? She didn't sleep that night, her mind racing with possibilities. She imagined him reading the note by flashlight, his thin fingers tracing her words. She imagined him wrapping the scarf around his neck, the warmth a small shield against the cold. But she also imagined him throwing the note away, too wary to trust her kindness. The uncertainty was a quiet torment. Weeks passed, and the boy kept coming. He never mentioned the note, never spoke, but Clara noticed a change. He lingered a little longer at the door, his eyes meeting hers for a fleeting second before he ducked away. Once, she thought she saw the scarf peeking out from his hoodie, a flash of blue against the gray. It was enough to keep her going, to keep her baking, to keep her hoping. She began to experiment with the bags, adding small surprises, a sketch pad and pencils one day, a paperback novel the next. She chose things she thought a boy his age might like, things that might spark a bit of joy. Each time he took them, she felt a flicker of connection, like a thread stretching between them. Spring whispered its arrival in early March, softening the air and coaxing buds onto the trees. Clara felt a cautious optimism, a sense that the world was waking up. She was behind the counter, setting out the boy's bag, a croissant, a hard-boiled egg, a pear, and a small bar of chocolate, when she heard the low rumble of engines. She glanced out the window and froze. 4 black SUVs, sleek and imposing, pulled up in front of the diner. Their tinted windows reflected the neon glow of her sign, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The doors opened, and men in dark suits stepped out. They moved with precision, their faces unreadable, their presence as out of place in Willow Creek as a storm in July. Clara's pulse quickened. Her first thought was of the boy. Had someone found out about her feeding him? Was she in trouble? She wiped her hands on her apron, her mind racing. Willow Creek was a town of pickup trucks and dusty sedans, not polished SUVs with government plates. The bell jingled, and the first man entered. He was tall, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Behind him came an older man, his gray hair neatly combed, his posture carrying a quiet authority. The others stayed outside, standing by the SUVs like sentinels. The diner, usually alive with the clatter of plates and chatter, fell silent. Old Man Jenkins looked up from his crossword, his pen frozen mid-word. Sarah's fork hovered over her pancakes. Even the truckers, usually loud with laughter, watched in hushed curiosity. "Clara Thompson?" the tall man asked, his voice clipped but polite. She nodded, her throat dry. "That's me." The older man stepped forward, his expression softer, almost kind. "My name is Edward Grayson. I believe you've been helping someone very important to me." Clara's heart stuttered. "I don't understand." Edward's gaze flicked to the paper bag on the counter. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to it. She nodded, her confusion mounting. He opened the bag, pulling out the pear and the croissant. A faint smile touched his lips, tinged with something like nostalgia. He always did love croissants. "Hmm?" Clara's voice was barely a whisper. Edward looked at her, his eyes warm but heavy with emotion. "My grandson, his name is Eli." Her name hit Clara like a wave. Eli, the boy had a name. She gripped the counter to steady herself, her knees weak. "Your grandson?" Edward nodded, his voice steady but laced with gratitude. "Eli's been missing for nearly a year. His mother, my daughter, passed away in a car accident. His uncle was supposed to care for him, but he wasn't capable. Eli ran away, and we've been searching ever since. We only found him last week thanks to you." "Me?" Clara's head was spinning, the words barely sinking in. The tall man, Clara now noticed the badge clipped to his belt, glinting faintly, spoke up. "I'm Agent Carter with the FBI. We've been tracking Eli's movements as part of a missing persons case. He's been coming here every morning, taking food you left for him. We followed him back to a makeshift camp in the woods near the creek. He's safe now, in our custody." Clara sank onto a stool, her breath catching. "He's safe?" Edward's smile was full of warmth, his eyes glistening. "Because of you, Miss Thompson. You kept him alive. You gave him a reason to keep going." Tears welled in Clara's eyes, spilling over before she could stop them. She thought of Eli's hollow cheeks, his wary eyes, the way he'd lingered at the door. "I didn't do much," she said, her voice breaking. "Just gave him some food." "You did more than that," Edward said, his voice firm but gentle. "You showed him kindness when he had none. You gave him hope. Do you know how rare that is?" The bell jingled again, and Clara looked up, her heart leaping. There, framed in the doorway, was Eli. He was cleaner now, his hair combed, his hoodie replaced with a warm jacket. But his eyes were the same, deep brown, flickering with a mix of fear and something new, something like trust. He stepped inside, hesitant, his hands fidgeting at his sides. Clara's heart swelled, a rush of emotions she couldn't name. "Eli," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. He looked at her, and for the first time, he spoke. "Thank you, Clara." The words were soft, almost lost in the quiet of the diner, but they carried the weight of everything unspoken. Clara stood, her tears falling freely now, and crossed the room to him. She didn't care about the men in suits, the SUVs outside, or the curious eyes of her regulars. She racked her arms around Eli, pulling him into a hug. He stiffened at first, his body tense, then relaxed, his small frame trembling against hers. She felt his arms lift, hesitantly returning the embrace, and her heart broke and mended all at once. "You're welcome," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "You're always welcome." But Diner erupted into applause. Old Man Jenkins was clapping, his crossword forgotten, his eyes suspiciously bright. Sarah was wiping her cheeks with a napkin, smiling through her tears. The truckers, usually stoic, were grinning, one of them letting out a low whistle. Even Agent Carter's stern expression softened, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. Edward stepped forward, placing a hand on Eli's shoulder. "Miss Thompson," he said, "I'd like to repay you for what you've done." Clara shook her head, still holding Eli's hand. Her thumb brushed his knuckles. "I don't need anything. Just knowing he's okay. That's enough." Edward's smile deepened, a mix of gratitude and determination. "I thought you might say that, but I insist. The diner could use some upgrades, yes? A new roof, perhaps? Or a better heater? And I'd like to set up a scholarship fund for Eli, to ensure he has the future he deserves." Clara opened una boca para protestar, pero la mirada de los ojos de Edward la paró. No solo era gratitud, fue respeto, un reconocimiento de la fuerza callada que había demostrado. Se detenía, overwhelada, incómoda. Edward turned to Eli, his voice gentle. "Would you like to stay here for a while, Eli, with Clara until we sort things out?" Eli's eyes widened, and he looked at Clara, a question in his gaze. She squeezed his hand, her smile trembling. "I'd like that," she said. "If you want to." Eli nodded, a small, shy smile breaking through. "I want to." The SUVs left as quietly as they'd come, their engines fading into the morning. Agent Carter promised to check in, and Edward left his card, his handshake warm and firm. The story of that morning spread through Willow Creek like wildfire, whispered over coffee cups and retold at the barber shop. Clara's Diner became a legend, a place where kindness had changed a life. Eli stayed. He helped Clara in the kitchen, his hands clumsy at first, but eager to learn. She taught him how to knead dough, how to braid challah, how to make her mother's honey bread. His laughter, rare at first, began to fill the diner, a sound that drew smiles from even the grumpiest customers. Clara found herself waking each morning with a new lightness, a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. The diner changed too. Edward's generosity brought a new roof, a gleaming oven, and a heater that hummed reliably. The scholarship fund grew, ensuring Eli could go to college one day, maybe even become the artist Clara suspected he was, judging by the sketches he left on napkins. But Clara never stopped her quiet acts of kindness. She kept leaving bags of food on the counter for anyone who needed them, travelers, neighbors, strangers, because kindness didn't need a reason. And in a world that could be cold and hard, a simple woman baker could make all the difference. Years later, when Clara was older and Eli was a young man, he returned to the diner with a degree in hand and a sketchbook full of drawings. One was of the diner, its neon sign glowing, a boy in a hoodie standing at the door. He gave it to Clara, his eyes bright with gratitude. "This is where I found home," he said. Clara hung the diamond above the counter, where it caught the light each morning, and every day at 5:37 she paused, remembering the boy who changed her life as much as she'd changed his.